Good morning, and welcome to our 5th annual Rutgers Gifted Education Conference, sponsored by the Continuing Education Office here at Rutgers and in collaboration with the College of Education. So we're very happy to welcome all of you here today, and we do mean all, because we have a full house. Every year we do. We have over 200 people here today to participate in today's learning activities, and I think that's a terrific tribute to the education leaders here in New Jersey and their understanding of the importance of gifted education as well as of professional development in general. How many of you in this audience are teachers? Could I just see a show of hands? Okay, vast majority. How many of you are administrators? I just gave you a little kudo there, so I hope there are some of you out there, and I'm very glad to see that there are. How about counselors and psychologists? Counselors and psychologists? Not so much. Okay. Thank you, Sylvia, for raising your hand. Maybe you should raise it several times to count for all the extra, power that's invested in those roles, which you'll hear more about as you hear from Sylvia Rim, our keynote presenter this morning. I'm Joyce Van Tassel-Baska. Many of you know me, so I don't have to say too much about me. If you want to know more, it's on the website in terms of the short bio that's in there. I was fortunate enough to be asked by Liz Beasley, who is now retired as the Director of Continuing Education, to develop a course sequence in gifted education. And I was pleased to do so and to start the certificate program based on that, linked very closely to the National Gifted Education Standards. So every course is linked to a set of standards in gifted education that have been nationally approved across all communities of educators in the country. So I'm proud to have been an instigator, shall we say, in terms of the kinds of work that's gone on at Rutgers subsequent that time. I've been proud to teach in the program, and before that, of course, I've been 28 years at the College of William and Mary as an endowed professor and the initial founding director of the Center for Gifted Education there, which you'll hear today about many of the materials that we've developed over the past 30 years, all of which have been tested for effectiveness with gifted learners. So that's been much a passion of mine over that time. Having introduced myself, I want to introduce you to the quote that's on the board. It's one of my favorites in terms of looking at education and why we do professional development. Professional Development Day like today is precious. This time is precious. The money that's been donated to bring you all together is precious, and we intend to make it useful to you. But you also need to engage to the degree that you realize that when you leave here, you have an obligation. And that obligation is to, in fact, begin to make choices that are deliberate on behalf of gifted learners. Deliberate in terms of those things that are in your best interests, both cognitively, affectively, aesthetically, and socially and emotionally. You'll learn a lot today about those things, but we also want you to just be aware that it's extremely important that these deliberate choices be made on behalf of a population that is probably the most overlooked in our educational system. I think that's a fair thing to say based on where we are federally as well as where we are in many of our states. You're going to hear today, at the end of the day, from two very important panels about where education, gifted education is going in New Jersey. One panel focused on the certification efforts, one panel focused more from an administrative perspective on some of the issues that have to be addressed. So I think as we go through the day, you will understand this quote at a deeper level, and when you end the day, I'd like you to come back to it and think about it in terms of its implications for you personally in terms of your work. Our conference purposes today are very specific. The first thing we want to do is to facilitate positive change on behalf of gifted learners. The quote clearly addresses that in more eloquent terms than just this phrase, but it's an important reason to be here, that we're looking at not doing things as you've always done them, whether you're a veteran or a newbie, but rather looking, are there some new strategies, new approaches that you could be using to both program development as well as to your overall efforts on behalf of the gifted. Secondly, we want you to have a chance to discuss issues and ideas that are central when it comes to program development and expansion. How many of you here already have what you would call a reasonably well-developed program for the gifted in your districts? Okay. And how many of you are here because you really see the need to either develop one or to expand the one that you currently have to higher levels of efficacy? All right, so we've got a good mix, I think, between that. The ones who really want to go forward in terms of expanding what you have, and the others who want to refine perhaps what you have. So number 2, I think, is an important purpose. And the third, and the last one that I want to comment on, is to provide support for advocacy among stakeholders here in New Jersey. We want you to leave with enough information and resources to be sure that when you go back, you have things to share. Things that you can share with your principals, with others in your educational community, but also with your parents. And many of you have picked up some of Sylvia's newsletters, which I think are terrific tools immediately to be addressing some of the issues she's going to be raising with you this morning. And there's other tools that you'll find when you, in fact, peruse later the handouts. The connections, by the way, to the handouts in favor of going green, you can have access to those workshop handouts on the site that you see here on the screen, and your Wi-Fi connection is listed below that. We'll try to put this back up at the end after Sylvia's presentation, but I just want you to know that there is a way of getting into the workshop handouts, and those are available as of right now. Is that right? Okay, terrific. It's also a good time, I think, to introduce 2 people who made this conference work this year in the absence of Liz and in the absence of our School of Education coordinator, Lenore Cortina, and that is Krista Ladow and Maria Kubarek. Would you guys just raise your hands, and would you give them a hand? Any of you who have been in the position of being an administrative assistant with a lot of responsibility and little authority will understand perhaps how they must be feeling at this particular point. But they've done a terrific job of pulling everything together for us. And if you didn't know it, you wouldn't think that things were different. So thank you so much for everything that you guys have done. It's now my pleasure to talk a little bit, just a few minutes, about the schedule today. So if you want to pull out your schedule, you have it in your packet, and we can kind of go through it together. And I thought it was important to introduce our workshop presenters also at this point, because there will be nobody in their rooms to introduce them. And some of you may know them, and some of you may not. I think we're very fortunate to have wonderful presenters at this particular conference. They're all excellent colleagues of mine who taught in the Gifted Education Certificate Program here. All of them have a lot of experience in terms of working with gifted learners. The accumulated years of experience range from the lowest number of years working with gifted learners to being 11, and the greatest to being 55. So I think we have, if you add up all the in between for the 6 major workshop presenters, that's a pretty large number of years. So you can be sure that you're talking to people who not only have classroom experience and therefore have a practical orientation to looking at all things gifted, but in fact have a lot of it, and have a lot of it at different levels, many of them having worked with gifted across all the elementary and middle school grades, some of them K-12, and of course now many of them, or most of them, at the university level doing work there. So I think it's important that you know that, but I want you also to know who they are individually. So Alyssa Brown, would you stand? Where are you? Sure. Okay, there, hey, at the front of the room. All right. Alyssa is one of my former doctoral students, one of my most successful graduates, to say the least. And she's a distinguished lecturer and director of the Hunter College Center program, previously the director of teacher and leader education programs in gifted education at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction for 5 years. She was director, I was fortunate enough to have her as director of the Center for Gifted Education, also for about that same period of time, the College of William and Mary. And then she moved, or has served as a state director of gifted ed, a federal grant manager, a district gifted program coordinator, principal of a specialized high school, and a teacher of gifted students. So Alyssa is probably, I think, among our presenters today, perhaps the most well-rounded in terms of her linkages to both different levels of education, but also being a teacher, educator, and also being an administrator. And so she really has this broad-based and deep experience in all of those areas. She currently coordinates the Advanced Certificate Program in Gifted at Hunter College, and serves, of course, as an adjunct professor here at Rutgers in terms of their certificate program. She, like almost all of our presenters, without exception, is published in the field of gifted education and presents widely on various topics. So let's give Alyssa a hand. Her session, she's doing just one session this morning. It'll be at 11:35 in the Maple Room. Most of you are pre-registered, so it's just to tell you kind of where she's going to be, and the schedule, links to that as well. The only other thing I would say is she's also moderating a panel this afternoon for administrators in this room. As a matter of fact, that's what these 3 seats are for up here. So that's good. Okay, our second workshop presenter is Alicia Katovich. Alicia, are you in the room? Okay, good. Wow, this room is so stretchy. It's a little hard. You want to come forward, hon, so people can see you better? Yeah. Alicia is an associate professor of gifted education at the University of Central Arkansas. Yet one of her jobs, of course, is to work with the Rutgers program as well. So she's an adjunct professor here in terms of this certificate program as well. She was a major, actually one of 2 principal investigators. I'll get it back, I promise. One of 2 principal investigators on the Javits grants, the STEM Starters grants at the University of Arkansas before she moved to her post at the present time. Both federally funded Javits programs that were housed at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock. She's the past president of the Arkansas Association of Gifted Education Administrators. She also serves on the board of Council for Sexual Children, Association for the Gifted TAG. She's written 4 books, done 50 other kinds of articles, mostly on looking at K-20 STEM initiatives for gifted learners. It's a very important focus because not all STEM programs are necessarily great for gifted, but she's focused on this whole issue of how does it really fit into our understanding of gifted. So she's also done a lot with technology and trying to use technology in teacher education programs to advance efforts on behalf of the gifted. And I know she looks like about a kid of 25, but I can tell you, how many grandchildren do you have? 4 grandchildren, okay, and she's on the way to more, or so she thinks. Let's give Alicia a hand. Our next workshop presenter is Debbie Daly. Where are you, Debbie? Okay, you want to come up here too so people on this side of the room can at least get a sort of visual of you? Debbie is also an associate professor of teaching and learning at the University of Central Arkansas, a colleague very directly with Alicia, and she's the coordinator for the Gifted and Talented program and director of a summer camp for talented youth called STEM U8 Engineering Academy. So those of you who are interested particularly in the engineering component of STEM, this is your gal in terms of having a lot of understanding of that. Prior to moving to higher education, Debbie was a high school science teacher and gifted education teacher for 20 years. I had the pleasure of observing her in classrooms in Arkansas at the K-3 level, where kids had learned nothing in science, and we put in our program for William and Mary, Project Clarion, to use as a gifted science program. She worked with the teachers to learn that program and to teach it, and it was the most powerful modeling experience I've ever seen anywhere. So if anybody's looking for what really works, you get a high school teacher in science who knows their stuff, who works well with others, and put them in with your primary teachers so they don't get scared, and they can do wonders in terms of getting kids to grow. The evidence from that work over multiple years has been astounding. So Debbie is with us. She's also done books, book chapters, and products that are focused on K-12 STEM education. She served, currently serves as the president-elect for the Council for Exceptional Children, the Association for the Gifted, and is a selected member of the Professional Standards Committee for NAGC. So we're happy to have Debbie as a part of our team here at Rutgers as well. Give her a hand, please. There's Brian in the room. I haven't seen Brian this morning. He is there. I see him coming forth. All right. Brian is a self-described geek. I love it. Anybody who'll put that on paper, you deserve a lot of credit. He's the coordinator of the Academically and Intellectually Gifted program at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. He earned his PhD in educational psychology at the University of Connecticut with an emphasis in both gifted and instructional technology. So that gives you a real feel for his skill base as well. He served 2 terms on the board of the NAGC and has acquitted himself extremely well in terms of that role as a member at large, taking on a lot of issues that many people would find not particularly desirable, at least over the last year or so, I understand. He's the author of several books, and he has experience over 20 years. As far as a consultant, he's probably our most widely spread out consultant, except for Sylvia, maybe, and myself, and that is he's worked in over 40 states, in Canada, Australia, Chile, Kuwait, and South Korea have been recent additions to that international list. He's a lover of technology, Star Wars, video games, and fonts, and he proudly identifies himself, as I said, a geek. Let's give it for the geek. The last workshop presenter that I'm going to introduce formally is Jessica Manzoni. Jessica, are you in the room? Okay, hon, would you come to the middle so people can see you too? Jessica, one of the things that's great about our faculty is that they're really spread out in terms of where in the country they've worked and the kinds of roles that they have held. Jessica comes to us from California, from University of Southern California, where she is a colleague with Sandy Kaplan and 2 of Sandy's latest grants, Javits grants. So she's done that work. She's formerly a postdoctoral research assistant and an adjunct professor in the MAT program at that university in the School of Education. But she's also been a primary teacher in the Baltimore City schools in Maryland, as well as an instructional coach and a professional development consultant. She sits on the executive board for the California Association for the Gifted and is deeply engaged in all things professional development. So let's hear it for Jessica. Okay, I think that's fair, just so you can see the faces, even if you're not going to some of their workshops, you know who they are, you know how to maybe hook into them later if you want to ask questions. So we are having then these presenters do workshops following the keynote. There'll be a snack break between session 1 and session 2, so don't forget to stop by the table out here if you're starving. And then know that lunch comes at 1:15, which is a good time by then. I think you'll be plenty hungry. And then we have a follow-up session, a very short award ceremony to award the scholarships to students who are going through our certificate program who have done such good work that they are receiving special compensation for that, shall we say. The award ceremony will be very short. It'll be 15 minutes. It'll be right back in here, so you can come to lunch right in this room. We will do this in a very timely fashion. And in terms of after that, you'll come back, some of you will stay here for the panel that Alyssa will be doing, which relates to administrators. And then some of you may go to the Sequoia room for the update on endorsement, which will be done by Michelle Falanga, Lenore Cortina, and Mike Kilberg. And those individuals, Lenore, are you in the room? Yeah, Lenore is back there. Do you want to come up, hon, or just, you don't want to stand back there, right? We've been very happy to have Lenore be a major part of this program for the past 4 years. And her work in the School of Education to try to bring together what we're trying to do with this certificate program into a more formalized entity within the School of Education, and to establish the best collaborative relationship we can with partners there, so that undergraduates as well as graduates in other programs are taking advantages of our courses in gifted education. Lenore has been the point person for that. She's worked very hard to bring the endorsement along, and this afternoon will have an update for you in terms of how that's going. Some of you may also know her as an instructor in the program, and she's done a great job in that role and coordinating the faculty assignments and so forth. We're going to miss her. She's just retired, but she's agreed to continue on to teach within the certificate program. So please give Lenore a good hand of applause. Okay, so that takes us through to 3:15, where we all say adieu and go on our way. So it's now my pleasure at this stage to remind you of one thing, though, before I introduce Sylvia, and that is that you have a link to evaluation, which was sent to all the attendees. The first 40 of you that had one sent and complete the survey will receive a free gift. So just keep in mind, if you can get on it, as soon as the conference is over, you have a free gift coming your way, not before Christmas, but before Thanksgiving. Look at it that way. That's a major breakthrough. Okay, and then I think I said the posting of the slides. We've got that on here, just so you know where to go. I think if one person might check that out, just to be sure that you can access the slides for your session. So you can't do it?
No, you can.
You can. Okay, great. That is terrific. Okay, so I think we are then ready for our keynote. Okay, yeah. Crystal's told me it would be great if there are empty seats. Could you move over? We have a few people who are standing and a few people outside who would like to be able to sit down, including a relative of Sylvia's. So it would be terrific if people could move in just to make room for some of these people to sit down, okay? We have any others outside, or are we okay now? All right. Well, it's my special pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Sylvia Rim, who is going to be our keynote speaker today. I've known Sylvia for over 35 years. We go back to when I was at Northwestern University.
When we were babies.
When we were babies. We were born. But I don't want to go back that far. I just want to go back to the reality.
That was 35 years ago.
Yes. Of course, yes. We're all much younger than we think. I say that every day, you know. Anyway, my head is, about 50 years old, and my sense of what I can do is about 35, and only occasionally does the 3-year-old tantrum start to occur. But anyway, Sylvia is a premier psychologist in gifted education and has been so for a large number of years. She didn't tell me how many, but that's okay. Enough to certainly have an impressive record, which is amazing. She's the director of the Family Achievement Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio, and a clinical professor at Case Western Reserve School of Medicine. She also counsels gifted children and their families at Menlo Park Academy, a charter school in Cleveland, a school she has worked with for 10 years and has worked with teachers and counselors and psychologists, but mostly parents within the context of that setting. A school that has been extremely successful in terms of its mission and what it's been able to do for gifted children. I'm sure she'll talk more about that. Her many years as a contributing correspondent to NBC's Today Show and as a favorite personality on public radio make her a familiar child psychologist to many audiences. This is something that I don't think anyone else in the field can lay claim to. Sylvia, more than any professional I know in the field, has been able to reach general audiences using language and ideas that appeal to a general audience, that sell the idea of the importance of gifted children and their development in the context of home as well as in the context of school. She's also written many books, including How to Parent so Children Will Learn, and Why Bright Kids Get Poor Grades. Both of them were 2008 National Best Books Award winners from USA Book News. She also did a wonderful New York Times bestseller called See Jane Win. It was actually one of my favorite books that's ever been done on looking at gifted girls in the context of gifted education. And her newest book is Jane Wins Again, and Women Have It All, a 15-year follow-up. So many of you will be interested perhaps in looking at not just the first volume, but now this follow-up piece of work. She speaks and publishes internationally on family and school approaches to guiding children toward achievement, reversing underachievement, gender issues in achievement, and social emotional issues related to giftedness and creativity. You're going to see when she gets up and talks to you how much she will be able to distill for you her love, her commitment, and her understanding of gifted children and their families. I'll give you Dr. Sylvia Rim.
It's awesome to follow Joyce. We've been following each other for many years. And I have to tell you the most important part of my introduction that she missed was that I graduated Douglas College. My husband is a Rutgers graduate. So I'm home. I was born in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and I'm so glad to be here with you. And before, when you came in, I asked if you had any burning questions. And I know you'll have many as I continue, but there were only 2 submitted. And the 2 that were submitted were honestly perfect. They were just perfect. Because one was about curriculum, what's the best curriculum, and the other one is what do we do about twice exceptional children, the social emotional issues. And it is truly the combination of appropriate curriculum and social emotional issues that we strive to provide for gifted children. And it's very, very tricky. And Joyce mentioned my opportunity to be on public radio for a dozen or so years and on television. And so I sat across the table from an adult who had three children, and said, I heard you when I was a kid on public radio. He was actually a young adult, just finished college. And you talked about gifted kids. And you were talking about me. And I heard and I understood that related to giftedness, sometimes there is a loneliness, but you're not alone. And you helped bridge that gap for me and start me on my way. It's an awesome opportunity that I have because curriculum, of course, is very important. And I've written a book. We're bragging about books called together with two others, Education of the Gifted and Talented. And Joyce has written many books on curriculum. She is certainly the curriculum expert. In terms of twice exceptionality, we have also both written books. One of hers is research-based and mine is clinically based, Why Bright Kids Get 4 Grades and What You Can Do About It. And right as we talked, I remember the kid that I'm working with in 8th grade who has 140 IQ but is dyslexic and we're struggling with. And so I'm still working with them. I'm working with these kids in the school that means so much to me and often have twice exceptionalities. And I pulled this out of the file. I wasn't going to talk to it, but I'll run down the list very quickly because I know I'm going to run out of time. But there are 10 things I think about when I think about achieving gifted kids. And one of them is the appropriate expectations, high but not too high. I'm going through these very quickly. Developing a work ethic, Carol Dweck's model of the harder you work, the smarter you get. Not miraculously, I am smart without effort. Third, crucial, competitive resilience. You win some, you lose some. If our gifted children win all the time, they are not equipped for real life. Getting up from failure experiences is crucial, and how you have to help them to understand that and deal with that. Fourth, disabilities, ADHD. Certainly ADHD, inattentive type, hyperactive type, high-functioning autism. We work with those kids, and they are gifted. And we can't just work with their disabilities. We have to work with their giftedness, and sometimes neither are worked with. The giftedness masks the disability, and the disability masks the giftedness. 5, of course, appropriate curriculum, and I'll talk more about that. Peer environments, and I want to mention that very importantly. They need to find peers, other gifted kids who share their interests. And I was explaining to Joyce in my charter school where I work, we get kids in kindergarten who come from all kinds of different environments. Some are overempowered, discipline problems, ADHD problems. And if they hang in there, by the time they've gotten to 8th grade, the high schools want them because they've adjusted, they've learned to follow their interests, they're deep thinkers, and they move on to success. And it takes that peer environment, the great relief that I'm not alone and I can live without being number one all the time, that we as counselors have to help them with as they come from other schools where everything was easy, or they were at the top of the class and didn't meet anyone like them. United positive parenting, difficult in the age of 1 parent, 2 parents, 3 parents, 4 parents, a few grandparents, and a few nannies. Getting parents and adults to be respectful of each other is crucial to avoiding the over-empowerment that happens with gifted kids. Parent advocacy and support for schools. If parents say good things about teachers, kids will learn in school. If parents say bad things about teachers, kids will not learn in school. They'll fight their teachers. Appropriate role models, and of course all of you are wonderful role models because here you are learning about gifted. And finally, what we always learn from teachers, excuse me, have to have water. This isn't champagne.
I noticed.
reasonable balance. You know, we heard well balanced, well balanced, well balanced, well balanced. It's hard for gifted kids to be balanced, but they do have to have reasonable balance. Reasonable balance between achievement and fun, reasonable balance between social life and too much social life. So that's what it's all about. Now, those are 3 of my books. I've actually written 24. That just tells you how old I am. Not all of them have been New York Times bestsellers.
You started early.
And this is my website, sylviarim.com. I have 100 articles on that website. I know you have lots of newsletters, and some of you ran out of newsletters, but there are 100 articles you can download free of charge and keep. And if you quote them, of course, I'd like you to document that you copy the material from me, but it's available to give to parents, for you to use for students. So it's all there. And of course, I'm still working in my clinic, even though I'm fairly young, because I love to do it and because I'm still helping families, and that's what it's all about. These are pictures. This is a picture from Menlo Park Academy, and this was about 5 years ago before we moved closer to the inner city. We are now much more diverse. You can see not much color there, but we have kids from every country and every background now, some from great disadvantage and some who come from upper middle class suburbs to have the opportunity to learn at our school. Our school is far from perfect. Charter schools always are. We have far from enough money to sponsor what we should be having, but we keep working at it. And I see those kids. Last year, I went to a Holocaust presentation with them. They were there among many other kids from other schools. And a 92-year-old explained to them what he went through in the concentration camps. And I heard the questions that came from our group that were so intelligent, so deep thinking. And then one young man said, "So what did you do for friends? What did you do for social life?" They could identify with this man because they were the same age now as he was when he was in concentration camps. And he answered, "We only wanted food. We only wanted food." And they understood that this was a unique experience that they could envision and learn from someone who was 92 and unfortunately passed away soon afterwards, but he left a gift with our students. And I admired our students and said, this is something worth working for. So here we go. And what is it that we have here? This quote, "You cannot separate our students' emotional report cards from their academic report cards." It's so important. It is not only academic, it is social emotional. When I saw no hands go up about counselors, not one single psychologist's hand go up, I said, where have we come? You, as educators, need to understand the social emotional components of giftedness. You have to understand what these kids are feeling and what they need to have, because there is not staff out there that's doing what we need to do. Now, there are not more suicides among gifted kids than there are other kids. That's a fallacy, but there are suicides. And there is depression, and there is intensity, and there is emotional loneliness. And some of that is just as normal as it can be, and it will get straightened out. But the kids have to understand it, because it's full of paradox. Gifted kids are unique, but there are hundreds of thousands of them. How can I be unique and be just like everybody else? And we have to help them to understand that, yes, you're unique. You're special to your parents. You're special to the people who love you. But there are plenty of other special people, too. And you can share that sense of specialness. And even if they don't have the IQ criteria, even if it's the art criteria or the music criteria, they need the opportunity to express themselves, develop themselves, and most important, make their contribution, because we need that contribution. So the expectations have to be high, but how can we keep them from being too high? It's tricky, because the words that surround gifted kids. From the moment they start talking like little talking machines when they're 8 months old, or reading when they're at the age of 2, or doing puzzles, or making unusual Lego kinds of things, they hear brilliant, extraordinary. They're going to cure cancer. From the clerk in the supermarket, from the grandparents, call them kings and queens. I talked to a gifted group of adolescents and I said, how many of you were called kings and queens or queens when you were little? And 25% of them raised their hands. It's all right if we could give them a throne and a country, but we have to take them into our schools and they have to learn to share attention. So the brilliant, even though they are brilliant, even if they go off the charts on the test, can become a pressure. And the hard issue is that motivation and pressure are flip sides of the same coin. You cannot be motivated unless you feel some pressure. And yet too much pressure can get you defensive and protective and underachieve. Yes, many gifted children underachieve. Many gifted children do not work to their abilities. And some gifted children work to their abilities sometimes they don't. Then they go back and they work again. So here I was talking to a young man. I'm sorry to talk in case studies, but I live case studies. I'm talking to a young man in college out in Montana that I saw when he was in kindergarten. And we worked with him, and he got over his issues. He was doing really well. And now he's on probation, actually about to drop out of school in Montana. So I'm not doing therapy, mind you. I'm just trying to help him out over the phone. So I point out that, you've been underachieving. You're a bright kid. You could do this. You just have to do your work. And I listened to all his excuses and his a little bit of pot and a little bit of girlfriends and a few other kinds of things. And then I said, look, there are 3 things that are really important for the reversal of underachievement that are kind of in life, not just in therapy, but in life. One is if you find a really good mentor, someone that you look at and say, I want to be like that person, and you're inspired to work hard, and that mentor gives you the opportunity. Another one is a high discipline situation like the armed services. You can't believe the number of people who go into the armed services feeling dumb and come out really smart. And they really are intelligent. They just messed up and never had that high discipline situation. And then, of course, the other one is finding, and I was talking to a young man who I knew was not gay. He was heterosexual. As a matter of fact, a girlfriend was part of his problem. And I said to him, and you've got to find the right, smart, hardworking girlfriend. That will also help. So I talked to him a little, and he was supposed to call me back. He never called me back. And I talked to his grandmother, and she said, he's looking for the smart, hardworking girlfriend. I touched a nerve. So it's hard to know whether that will do it or not. But so the pressures are to be the smart and smartest that can easily come. Now, what happens if King Special's on a throne or Queen Special's on a throne? They're just terrific. They learn, they achieve, they're motivated, they do just fine. And what happens if a sister or brother comes into the scene? Well, some adjust beautifully, but sibling competition makes a huge difference. Whatever genetics gives us, environment makes a difference. And sibling situations or being an only child can also make a difference. Dealing with competition is very, very real. You may see one sibling in their school who is you often see one high-achieving child in your school who's gifted and a sister or brother who is maybe just as gifted, but not functioning that way. Or you may not even think is gifted because they're underachieving so dramatically. Now, sometimes the second child comes and dethrones that first child, and they fall apart. And what happened to the child? They just go underground. And sometimes the first one keeps that second one down and makes sure that that child doesn't feel very confident. And I see that all the time. And I have plans for those kids. We can fix them. It absolutely is possible, but you have to take that child aside and say, you know, your little brother, he's really a nice little kid and he loves you so much. If you could just do something nice for him and help him out a little bit, you know, I'm just going to be watching. We won't tell him about the plan, but when you can do those things, you'll see how he thrives and how he helps, he learns. I can hear Eric, we have 4 children, say about David, how come David knows everything? As David would say, why don't you learn to do this? Why don't you learn to do this? But they learn to love each other and both achieve. So it's a tricky thing, but it can be done. Hard when it's a perfectionist sister that's following a brother. That can dethrone a boy very easily. So that competition is one thing. And here they are in your class, and their hand is always up. And they always have something to say. And you told them 100 times they're supposed to raise their hand before they talk. And they raise their hand and they talk anyway. And I'm thinking of a 2nd grader that came to our school, and he had this problem. His hand was always up. His hand was always up. And I was seeing him to help him adjust to at least waiting till the teacher called on him. And I said, look, we've worked on this for 3 sessions, and you know you're supposed to wait until you're called on to talk. And then I observed you in class, and there you were, talking again, before you were called on. And he said, I don't know what it is. I just love to talk. I was just born to talk. When you think about it, how magical are those words when those little kids have the big words? We give them all that praise. We give them all that attention. They are attention addicted. They may appear attention deprived, but they are attention addicted. And for some of them, they just can't get enough. And you've got to figure out whether it's ADHD, really impulsive, and they need medication, or whether an intervention can help. And we always try that first, but sometimes we need the medication too. I'm just going to skip a few. And then, of course, they have to rush through their work. And the teacher says to them, he rushes through his work and just wants to get it done and makes careless mistakes. So I was giving a coffee and conversation to the parents in our school, and one mother said, so the teacher says he rushes through his work and makes careless mistakes. And I said, so how many of you have heard that from a teacher? All the hands went up that had boys, not the girls, but the boys. Once in a while I find a girl. They think the first one done is the smartest, and the last one done is the dumbest. And then, of course, we finally get them to slow down. Then we give them time tests, and they have a slow processing speed. And we wonder where that came from. Now, I'm not sure what this is about speed, but for certainly these kids have to figure this out. And this pencil anxiety that I describe, because it's not an official disorder, folks, that worry when you write, you might be too fast or too slow, or not do it right, or your brain gels. That pencil anxiety is what got me on public radio. That got me on public radio. I had a 5-minute interview for Why Bright Kids Get Poor Grades, first called Underachievement Syndrome, Causes and Cures, by Tom Clark in Wisconsin. It was 6:30 in the morning. I hung up the phone, and he called me back, and he said, you described me when I was a child. Would you please come back on our show and answer parents' questions? And I did that for 8 or 10 years before I got on my national show. But I did discover when I talked to radio announcers, there were an awful lot of those underachievers, gifted underachievers, verbal kids who could talk and talk and talk, but writing was very hard. So the perfectionists, those girls who want to do everything perfectly, there are boys too, incidentally, absolutely an issue. You've got to help them. I can hear this young lady that we grade skipped, very, very smart, and she said, I like math better. You know why I like math? You know whether you're right or wrong. It's black and white. You know the right answer. When I write something, when I write a story or a composition, the teacher always criticizes me. The teacher always criticizes me. Guess what? That's healthy for you, dear. That's really healthy for you to know that you don't write perfectly. And of course, as an author, and Joyce can relate to this, I usually do about 40 drafts of a book before it goes to the editor. And maybe I'm not that good a writer, because then they always correct it and fix it up again.
And yeah, I'd like to cry too, but when those tears come at you and you're criticizing gently, positively a student, don't stop the criticism. Just say, I know this feels hard, but it's important to learn that you can't be perfect. And then I always tell parents, if they're looking over their children's writing and they see mistakes, to go through it with a light pencil and make little check marks where they think there could be changes, and then let the kid decide which ones they want to change and which ones they want to erase, so they don't feel overwhelmed, but they learn to gradually accept criticism. Really, perfectionism can be a tremendous problem for gifted kids. This young lady who had gone through, was perfect through 7th grade, but not enough curriculum. Then the work got hard, and she fell apart, went to drugs and dating, and dating the wrong guys. And I found her in high school and got her back on track, got her back to her work, got her off the drugs, and then she said, oh, if I could only have a perfect career. Perfectionism is the issue. Okay, and the misunderstanding that if you're smart, schoolwork should be easy. That's the crucial issue. We have to help them understand that when they see challenge, they don't have to back away. It doesn't mean that they're dumb. That's the greatest change when kids come to our school from not having been in gifted programming. They were at their top of the school, everything was easy, everyone knew they were all A students, and they come to our school and they may not get all A's. They may be just average. And that's so difficult for them. To have something feel hard, they want to go back to their old school. They say they want to go back to their friends, but they want to go back to where things are easy. But that's not real life. And we have to explain what will happen if they're not challenged in elementary school. They'll be in shock when they get to the difficult AP classes in high school. They'll fall apart. Or in our day when we went to college, because we did not have opportunities for challenge in high school that kids have today. So we'd go to college and say, I remember it. I remember going to Douglas, guys. I remember how stupid I felt, how terrible I felt, and I got a C. I got a C in my freshman year, and I thought, I got depressed. I thought, I can't do this. I can't learn. I don't belong in college. So that's what kids need, is a preparation for real life. And of course, I got over it because here I am. I'm not depressed. But I just found out that I couldn't do everything. And now the pressure for creative kids. And Joyce and I love these kids. This is a real kid. This is a real kid. I skipped one kid because I got so excited, and I'll tell you about him. He came to me, I was in Wisconsin, moved from New Jersey to Wisconsin. Can you imagine that shock? So we were in Wisconsin, and this kid came down to see me from northern Wisconsin, and he was in 1st grade. And he had just been diagnosed as special education, was going to be put in a special education program, and the parents were beside themselves. This is what happened. So he was reading spontaneously in 1st grade, and they put him in the high reading group, and they gave him workbooks to do. And he looked at the workbooks, and he probably had that pencil anxiety, and he said, I don't do workbooks. The teacher thought, well, maybe it's just too hard for him. So she put him in the middle group, and they had workbooks too. And he said, I told you, I don't do workbooks. They're too boring. And finally put him in the lowest reading group, where they didn't do workbooks. They did cut and paste. And he listened as the teacher groaned on and on about beginning consonant sounds that he could have taught the class. And he put his hand inside the jar of paste. And he watched the paste come out, and he said, oh, that's the theory of displacement that my father told me about. Well, that was the referral to special education. Now, I did a little digging, and I soon found out that he would come home and say, school is boring, which of course it was. And his father would say, school was boring for me too. It just wasn't creative enough. So he had his father's power behind him to stand up and tell the teacher, you're not teaching me right. We got it all straightened out. He didn't have to go to special education, but he always had that creative bent. He always had that creative bent. Very quickly, though, we got him in the right group. We got him, when he learned to do the writing and the necessary notebooks, he could work on the computer with a 5th grade mentor. He had all kinds of interesting opportunities going. The problem was over. But then I would get letters every Christmas, and guess what? I still do. I still do. The letters came from his mother at first, and now they come from him. So this is one of them. I've decided to let you know that he's doing swimmingly well. He made the dean's list both semesters as a physics major, the theory of displacement. Having decided to change to an electrical computer engineering major, he took a computer summer class, got A, and at mid-semester this fall he has 4 A's and B. Not everything has changed, and we didn't want it to change. He's still a romantic. His aspiration is to be a tour guide in Siberia or tour with grizzly bears wherever he goes. Important, he was the most improved player on the hockey team. Last year, 2nd high scorer, and it's very obvious when the team is on or off the ice from our observation that he likes everyone and everyone likes him. Sports were very, very important in my interventions, helping kids learn to deal with competition, helping them to learn collaboration are all key to the achievement. Then, greetings, John just received his master's degree in December. Hallelujah. He went to a cinema photography school out west, and then he, well, I won't go through all of them. You'll have to see the wedding picture. That's where he met his wife. Then the next one was John has been in Mongolia, more specifically in the Gobi Desert for the past 3 weeks, filming the bears of the Gobi Desert. It'll be on 2020. And then I got his Emmy Award winning news, and the last few are his reading my book and showing me his 2 daughters, How to Parent So Children Will Learn, and greeting me and his great achievements. So if you see something on National Geographic, look for his name, and you might see that creative kid who almost got put into special education when he didn't have a special education problem. At any rate, those creative kids need the opportunities for creative thinking, and they need to know the value of rigor. And that is the trick, because just like the academically gifted kids internalize, I have to be smart, smartest, these kids internalize sense I have to be different all the time. They can't get started on the topic because it isn't different enough. Or they have to go to drugs to be different, or to clothes to be different. And then I lose them. When they get heavily into drugs, it's very, very hard to deal with them. Just understand that message that we are giving in schools everywhere, find your passion, can be misinterpreted. Find your passion, to some kids say you can't do anything that's rigorous or boring. And that's really frightening, because if you look at real life creativity, it is the ability to brainstorm and be creative and think divergently, but it is also the ability to be diligent and disciplined and rigorous. And it is a paradox. But if you can't convince kids that they shouldn't have to be passionate every minute of the day, if they understand there is a place for engagement, importance of engagement, but they're not required to enjoy every single thing they do. They really have to learn to work hard, just like their parents did and their grandparents, and they're not more special so that they can avoid work. Now, it's a problem, because the research is very clear that when you're engaged, you learn more. When you're passionate, you learn more. But that's not enough. That's not enough. Because in the real world, it can't be that way all the time. In real productivity, you have to have that balance. So it isn't that there's anything wrong with being a little passionate, because boy, we sure are. But there are some things that you do that you don't like to do. You have to write letters of reference, you have to write reports, you have to do all kinds of stuff. People cancel appointments. Sometimes you work with people who say, I know that, I know that, I know that, I know that. And you know, maybe they do know it, but why'd they come to me if they knew that things were going so well? So, you know, we have good days and bad days in the real world. And you as educators have good days and bad days in the classroom. And sometimes you're really passionate about what you do, and sometimes you're just darn tired. But you don't quit. And how can we give that message to kids if all we say is find your passions, find your passions, find your passions? Then as soon as things get hard, they think, this is not my passion, I have to try something else. And then they think they have to find their passion when they're in 3rd grade. And you know, it takes a long time to figure out what you want to do. You know, unlike the path of many, I didn't find my work until after I was a parent first. And then I went back to school. And I didn't even get started until I was 40 in my career. But it's been the right career for me. And sometimes it just takes a little longer. So you can understand that for highly creative kids, we want to cultivate their creativity, but their diligence, their work ethic is extremely crucial, and helping them to understand empathy, how what they're doing is received, is very, very crucial. To understand social skills appropriately. But you know, the pot makes them feel happy, the alcohol makes them feel happy, and we have a big drug problem in this country, a very serious, serious, serious drug problem. But it makes them feel passionate, it makes them feel happy. So we do need to be careful if we don't lose our wonderful gifts to the drug world. And then of course the peer issues. They don't want to be a goody-goody, they don't want to be a nerd, they want to be popular, and they want to be beautiful, and they want to be handsome, and they want to be cool. And can you help them with that? Because of course we want some of that. We want them to have social skills. But they'll get in trouble, even take punishment that they don't even deserve just to be part of the popular crowd. They'll be with kids who have no values just to be included and popular. Can you help them? One of the most important issues I help kids with is that loneliness, and I'll talk more about it with anxiety. I know I'm just not moving fast enough right now. But all kids feel lonely. All the kids feel lonely some of the time. It's just that when they look at the outside of other kids, they think they're not lonely. And the kids don't see their loneliness inside. So they think that they're alone with it. But when they get to middle grades and when they get to high school, they're going through loneliness. If they only know that once they find their interests and find friends that share their interests, some of the loneliness disappears. And by the time they get out of 8th grade, the middle school loneliness is gone. Then they start again in high school. And by the time they get out of high school, the high school loneliness is gone. Then they go to college and they get lonely again. And then they graduate college and they're feeling really good and they get lonely again in their job. So that's just part of learning to deal with new environments. If they think it means that there's something wrong with them, that they're mentally ill because they feel lonely, that loneliness is scary. If you tell them that loneliness they feel is part of normal life, finding one's identity is what you have to do, and it takes a while, and it takes exploring, and it can be lonely until you find that identity, and even then it's just darn not perfect. There are health problems that take place, there are economic problems, and if they understand that in every home there are problems, but you can get over those, and you can learn to appreciate your life and value your life. And if you travel, and we travel, and I've traveled, and you look at other countries, it really is amazing what we have here, despite the politics. Sorry about that. So popular is not competitive. Now here's the competition. Children will become achievers only if they learn to, I've got to skip a lot of things here. So if you just know that you can get to these things on my website. The first one is children will become achievers only if they learn to function in competition. I've mentioned that already. And children will continue to achieve. They usually see the relationship between the learning process outcomes. That's the curriculum piece. And that's where you have in quadrant 1 the appropriate relationship. When they work hard, they get good grades. They get appreciated. When they don't work hard, their grades go down. That's a plus thing. A minus is underachievement. Oh, I studied last night. I don't know why I didn't get an A. Well, their headset was on. They were watching television, and they called that study. The teacher gave me an A. Lucky break. That's the disconnect. The disconnects that go, that the environments that get them into that last box are quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. Quadrant 2 are the kids who work hard but are twice exceptional, and they still aren't getting results. So it's that kid that I told you with 140 IQ who struggles with reading. He can hear what he's supposed to know. He can listen. He reads with his ears, but he can't read. He really struggles with it. That is frustrating. That makes you want to give up. Quadrant number 3 is the more typical problem with very gifted kids, where they don't do any work and they get all A's and everybody tells them they're wonderful. Why should they work? So those two environments, curriculum environments, lead to quadrant 4. And this one, school children are more likely to be achievers if their parents join together to give the same clear and positive message about school effort and expectations. And children become oppositional defiant if one adult allies with them against a parent or a teacher, making them more powerful than an adult. Now, genetics may make them strong-willed, but environment is hugely important. I have to tell you that it's very complex, because it can be 1 parent, 2 parents, 3 parents, 4 parents, it can be a babysitter. But if a kid gets the power of 1 parent against the other parent, they are over-empowered. And understand that too much power corrupts. And some of you may have heard my V of love, which means empowerment has to be gradual. As little kids, they start down here, little power, few responsibilities. As they move up, a little more power. This is in the classroom and at home. More power and more responsibilities. The power has to match the ability to be responsible. Then they can move out and find their identity and feel good about it. That's what development tells us. If you do it the other way, and a lot of parents of gifted kids do it this way, it's in style. They think if they give little kids choices, they're going to give the child appropriate empowerment. No. And this quote is from my son's medical school graduation, and I don't know who I'm quoting, but he said, with great power goes great responsibility. Or maybe that's Spider-Man who said that. Spider-Man said that. With great power goes great responsibility. That's the one at my son's graduation said, power without responsibility is animal anarchy. Power without responsibility is animal anarchy. It is true. And we see kids like that. They come into our school. They want to run the school. They run off the playground. They won't listen to teachers. They really think they're supposed to make all the choices. And the hardest thing is when you try to take that power away, they become impossible. You have to do it very carefully and very slowly. And so I have these 2 wonderful identical twins I'm working with. Both are gifted. Both parents happen to be lawyers. They just happen to be lawyers. And in the last discussion, they really are parenting pretty nicely together. But they argue. These kids argue. And their fathers and mothers argue too, in law. So, but anyway, they argue. And we were trying to figure out what it was that kept them arguing. And most things they were doing were just right. And then I heard it. Because when the mother argues with the kid, she knows how to put a stop to it, put a lid on it. When the father argues, he keeps arguing. And she tells him, the father, to stop arguing. That means those kids get mother's side against dad. And that is too much power. These kids are 7 years old. These kids are 7 years old. And they are over-empowered. Now, fortunately, these parents are listening. They will change it. At 7, it's easy. It's not so easy at 15. It simply is not so easy as they get older if they've been over-empowered. And of course, we want them to have more power at 15. In my book, Growing Up Too Fast, where I did research on 5,000 middle school kids, I was stunned to see how over-empowered middle grade kids are and assumed they should make all the decisions, that they were already adults. Sometimes I talk to kids about the V of love, and one is in 4th grade. He said, oh, I'm up here. No, you're not up there. You're not making a living yet. So you can see that this is pretty important. Balancing act it is, and I'm watching my time, so how fast can I go? Thank a teacher. And of course I do tell this to parents. When they come to our school and I meet with the new parents, I tell them our teachers will talk to you about your child, they're interested, they'll have communication with you. But if you say to your child, you have a bad teacher, you can't learn from that teacher, that child will not learn in our school. Now here's the problem. When people come to our school, since it's a charter school, they come from a school where they were not happy. So the kids have already heard the school is not serving your needs. So you can see how crucial that is. But it works. Thank a teacher, especially for teachers. Especially for teachers, because if you have children, how many of you are also parents? Okay. If you have children, and you're talking about other teachers over the dining room table, beware. If you're putting other teachers down, even if they don't have them, that gives them permission. Oh, that teacher's not that good. That teacher's not that good. They'll pick and choose. The fact is, not all teachers are perfect, right? There are some average teachers. There's some above average teachers, some far above average teachers. Every one of you are far above average, no question about it. But there are some that are below average, but you still have to learn in school from them. They're not going to get fired. Hopefully, if they're really bad, they won't make it. Okay, now this is a key thing. This is what it looks like. And these are not names for children. They're names for characteristics of underachievement. The children in the inner circle are the children I call achievers. The children who learn to deal with competition. They love to win, but they win some, they lose some. Those are the children who developed a work ethic. The harder you work, the smarter you get. This is from Why Bright Kids Get Poor Grades, but it's also in almost every one of my books. So on the outside of the kids were the kids who use defense mechanisms. And on the left side of those who use dependent, excuse me, I'm talking too much, defense mechanisms. Dependent defense mechanisms are anxiety, fearfulness, and I'm going to talk more about fearfulness in the workshop. So those are the perfectionists. Now, we're going from top to bottom in terms of extremes of the characteristics. So the perfectionists, if they continue, if people still dance around them and they do not take opportunities to challenge themselves, end up being depressed Don or Donna at the end. Now, the problem is, if we respond intuitively to highly sensitive kids, now the Harvard longitudinal study said 50% of shy children turned around, so you know that environment makes a difference. So if you respond intuitively to the tears and body language that say, don't criticize me, feel sorry for me, I can't do this is too hard. If you over-respond to that, then you build in what we classically condition children into feeling love only when they're sad. And it's a tricky thing, because we want you to be sensitive to children. We don't want you to be oversensitive. Oversensitivity does not cut it. Sensitive is important. How do you draw the line? I watch carefully what happens. So if the parent is repeating over and over again the same behaviors, then we have a kid who is being trained to be oversensitive and sad. And I'll just give you an example. A kindergarten kid who came to our school, parents come in with their little daughter who's not in school yet, and they said, since he's been at school, he's making us move all the furniture, and he's afraid of things, and he's developed all these fears, and each time both mother and father were on the same page, but every time he got a fear, he said, move that plate's talking to me, move it. And so they moved the plate. And what's wrong? Why are you having this problem? And pretty soon, he had both parents dancing around him. I said, guess what? Guess what? Now, it isn't this child's intentionally manipulating. He's doing what works. Power. He's using the power to get attention away from his sister. He's not a mean kid. He's not a bad kid. But you say it once, there's nothing to be afraid of. When you tell us to move things, we're not going to move them anymore. You can tell them. If you want to cry, you can cry. You can go into your room and cry. It's not a punishment. You can read a book. You can go to sleep. You can do what you want to, but there's no big deal here, and we're not going to move it. One week, it was all over. 1 week, it was all over. But if it had gone on a lot longer, then it's harder and harder. So what I have to do is listen carefully to what the parents or teachers are doing and that are training children to back away and back away and back away, and then in small steps we move forward. And again, that if you have a kid like that you're working with in school, you'll want to come to my next group. The dominant kids are the over-empowered kids. And sometimes by adolescence, they're a combination of both. Those are the kids who are at the top, at the top, at the top. What's academic Alice doing? She has never gotten anything but an A. Every single thing she's been recognized. She's always won first prize. But when she gets to college, she gets a C in Harvard. And she comes to see me because she's depressed. Because she's never, ever experienced anything that feels like failure. And that can be a she or he, because I've seen them. We had one young man who was already accepted into college, perfect 4-point average, took all the advanced classes, took advanced physics before having the necessary calculus, got a C in an exam, and attempted suicide. They're just not resilient enough. Now he's fine, he's not attempting suicide anymore and he's in college. But that's how extreme it can be. So those dominant kids who have to run the show, and I can't, I don't have enough time to discuss this in full because we are past time. So I'm just going to.
Take 5 more.
But,
Take 5 more.
Okay. Well, this is my trifocal model, and it's a way of reversing underachievement. It's just steps. It's very fluid. There's lots of room for your flexibility, but it is a guide so that you know that what all the important things that you can change for children. I can't go into that because I want to do something else. It's very important to me. I want to end with this note. What got me into underachievement was a report in 1984 called A Nation at Risk. Now, I'm not sure where they got the statistic, but what they said was 50% of gifted children don't achieve to their ability. It's very, very hard to document the number of underachievers. And there was a person that probably some of you know and some of you don't know, Jim Gallagher, who wrote a textbook on gifted that I read, and he was talking at NAGC many years ago, and he said, there's this underachievement syndrome we have to deal with. And I said, I'm working on it, Jim. I'm working on it. When I was in graduate school, I went back to graduate school late, and school psych at UW-Madison, and I said to my professor, I want to specialize in gifted kids. And he said to me, gifted kids don't need psychologists. And I said, I think they do. He said, how about if you work with Gary Davis? Gary Davis in creativity. And we changed my advisor, and I was happy and he was happy. Now, it wasn't, he just didn't realize. This gifted man, who was my advisor and was a professor in educational psychology, who taught lots and lots of teachers, did not realize that gifted kids have social emotional needs. He assumed that all gifted kids achieve to their ability. So you can see how important it is. So this it's persistent, authentic American dream that by superior performance one can raise one's state in life and shape one's own future. That came from A Nation at Risk. And together with that came a report on IQ scores of immigrants coming to this country, and I believe it was around 1911. I don't have the date there, and I should. But the psychologists of that day gave immigrants coming into Ellis Island an IQ test. If you visit Ellis Island, you will see it there. It's like a little physical hand kind of spatial thing. These immigrants who couldn't speak the language, who had struggled and come through in the holes of ships, came to this country, and on the way out, they got IQ tested. And the psychologists of that day lined them up, smartest to dumbest. Just so happened that England came out with the smartest people. And then there was Holland, Denmark, Scotland, Germany, Sweden, Canada, and guess what happened with those poor Polish kids who came and were called dummies because their IQ tests on this were not so good. So here they are. The test results in 1912 by Goddard said, established that 83% of the Jews, 80% of the Hungarians, 79% of the Italians, and 87% of the Russians were feeble-minded. But they came on that Statue of Liberty that said, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. And they came and they met their teachers. They met their teachers and they put their teachers up on a pedestal. And those feeble-minded kids became unfeeble-minded. That's what happened. And my parents came over from Riga, Latvia. And my mother had almost no education. My father maybe a year or two. My mother said to me, you should marry an educated man. You should marry an educated man. Women don't need college degrees. And then my guidance counselor, Henrietta Herbert, in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, took me aside and said, Sylvia, you can go to college. I'll tell you where you can get the scholarships. I said, my sisters didn't get the opportunity to go to college. They went to work after school. My parents can't afford college. How can I go to college? I said, you can go to college. And she gave me a big, thick book. And I sent in for every scholarship that I could qualify for. And she sent me a letter of reference for every scholarship I could qualify for. And then she said, go to NJC. It wasn't Douglas then. It was NJC. She was a graduate of NJC. She said, go to NJC. You can go where you want to, but it was a good opportunity for me. And so I went to NJC, which while I was there became Douglas College. And I told you how frightening that experience was for me. I felt I didn't speak with the right English. I felt I didn't come from the right background. But somehow I got through and I learned, and I got that message. And Mrs. Herbert made that kind of difference for me. Not only that, in kindergarten, I had Miss Moore. In first grade, Miss Wargo. In second grade, Miss Zanzalari. In third grade, Miss Garrison. In fourth grade, I had Miss Schubert. She was a really special teacher. She gave Joan Fishkoff and me some extra special work. And it was a hard workbook. And we worked on it together. I guess it was the gifted program. And it was too hard. We went to Miss Schubert and we said, this is too hard. It's okay, Sylvia, she said. You don't have to be perfect. Just keep trying. And Joan Fishkoff and I finished it. I'm still in touch with Joan Fishkoff. We're still sending silly old people jokes to each other. And she's still teaching too. So there it was. And I could go on with the other teachers too, because it's amazing. I remember little things that made such a difference. Childhood is such a short time, but parents and teachers make a huge difference. And that's what I want to tell you, how important you are. And my final message, 100 years from now, it will not matter what my bank account was, the sort of house I lived in, or the kind of car I drove. What the world may be different because I was important in the life of a child. The world will be different because you're important in the life of a child. You make that difference. You're the one who can turn that underachiever around. And I can tell you, it really is you, because all the strategies we have are less important than falling in love with their teacher. Adding those strategies to the role model that they see as giving them good advice makes all the difference. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Thank you, Sylvia, for that inspirational and wonderfully informative talk. We're a few minutes behind this morning, and what I'm going to suggest is, there's a little bit of things to gnaw on outside. So if you take the next few minutes and then move to your next session, please check the programs that you're going to, because you know who you're already signed up for, and get there. And presenters will start 5 minutes late. So we'll start at 10 o'clock in their sessions rather than at 9:55, okay? See you later in the day.